And we're also remembering today that it's 40 years ago that a team of divers and archaeologists and scientists went down to the depths of the Solent to raise that buried gem of Tudor history, the Maryrose.
After more than 400 years sitting on the seabed, she remains on display at Portsmouth Dockyard. John is there for us this morning with very special access. John, how are they marking the anniversary?
Yeah, it's a huge day for everyone involved in the Maryrose, Sally, and we'll hear some of the family stories a bit later on in a few minutes' time. You'll hear that this ship really gets into people's blood. Look at it, though. Absolutely magnificent. Extraordinary to think that a wooden ship survived this intact for 437 years at the bottom of the ocean, sealed in mud to stop the oxygen getting to it and to stop the timbers rotting. 600 oak trees were felled to build her. She was the pride of the fleet, King Henry VIII's flagship. He stood on the ramparts of Southsea Castle and watched her as she made her last voyage and sank during a battle with the French. She was then underwater, as I say, for that almost 4.5 centuries, was brought to the surface exactly 40 years ago today.
There is the wreck of the Maryrose. It has come to the surface. There is the first sight of this flagship of Henry VIII. It's the first time we have seen this in 437 years.
Inch by inch, the ship that was the pride of Henry VIII's mighty navy peaked above the waters of the Solent and began to reveal her secrets. Alex Hildred was part of the original dive team and says 40 years on, we're still learning about life on board.
We can reconstruct their faces, we can reconstruct their lives. With DNA technology, we can learn about where they were born and what color their eyes would be if you process it enough. And our problem is there's so much we can learn. We've got to save some things for when technology gets better so that you don't have to destroy anything.
The then Prince Charles was present to witness his ancestors' flagship return to the surface.
I believe she's in marvellous condition.
And he was right. The half of the ship and a huge number of artefacts were preserved by centuries, cocooned in mud and silt on the seabed.
Can you guess what's in here?
No.
Look at the shape of the drawer. So these are some of our Tudor longbows. This is actually one of the ship was listed with 250 longbows.
Oh, they're bows.
So these are some of them. We've got 130 odd that are complete out of the 250 and fragments of a bit more.
When the ship was first raised, she was kept wet by spraying her timbers, but in recent years, technology has allowed for dry preservation.
Drying out, it can shrink by up to 50% without treatment. So it was sprayed with water for the first 12 years until we came up with a treatment using research to be able to then preserve the ship for future.
500 souls were lost when the ship sank during a battle with the French in 1545. And the work goes on today to help tell their stories alongside the history of the Maryrose, providing precious insight into life almost 500 years ago.
And the reason that we know about that, the reason the ship is here, the reason there are 19,000 artefacts here is because of, well, hundreds of people really, but two very special people and their descendants are with us today. We're talking about Margaret Rule and about Alistair McKee. Nick and Binky are respective children of both. Binky, your dad started talking about this ship at the age of 15, is that right?
Yes, when he was a teenager. He lived in Southsea, and I can imagine him standing there where Henry VIII was when the ship went down, and he must have said to himself, one day I will find that ship, because he saw it marked on a local chart, and all through the rest of his life he had that plan and that dream, and he always saw it as, I will learn to dive, I will search for her, I will find her, and I will excavate her, and I will raise her, along with all the people who have helped along the way.
Because it would have been a dream, I think we spoke about it just off air, but no one really knew what was there and indeed how complete she was and is.
Nobody believed it. I mean, it was one thing that made it special was that Dad had utter belief in it, and the divers that he brought in from the Sub-Aqua Club, they went along with it, and they really believed what he believed, that there was a ship here and that the Tudor artefacts would be fantastic and that she was worth raising.
Amazing. Nick, your mum, Margaret, an archaeologist, and she'd worked on other projects as well, but again was the lead archaeologist on this. What was it like growing up with, presumably, this being the subject of every single family conversation?
The first decade for me was Fishbourne Roman Palace.
Right.
I started in a pram at the age of about 2. Apparently my first coherent words were, "Poor mummy, pot all broken."
Oh, OK.
But the second decade was Maryrose decade. And first, I started helping by logging divers out the water in sort of 73-ish. I can't even remember the first time I was out there. In about 76, I learnt to dive, joined a diving team, and ended up specialising in some of the photography to record the ship and the shape of the ship so that it would fit in the cradle.
What an apprenticeship. And again, from your mum's point of view, she was always convinced that it was there, it was as good as what we see today?
Yes, I mean, particularly once everybody touched it in 1971. And that's when it became big. But the year before, in 1970, the first iron gun was found. And that was a very big clue. That was something down there of exactly the right age. And from then on, it just got more and more exciting every year.
All right. Well, great to talk to both of you today. I know that you've only recently become acquainted, so lots and lots of stories to share. So fantastic to see you so close up to the Maryrose this morning. The white substance you can see is the preservation. It's the wax that's been sprayed across the whole ship now to stop it denigrating any further, because of course now it's back in the air, although this is climate controlled. You get a chance to come to the museum to see it. It's an absolutely extraordinary site with an extraordinary history, and as we heard earlier, a very, very interesting future too.
John, thank you very much indeed. I remember watching that as a kid, don't you?
Blue Peter, wasn't it?
It's a big story when we were little.
Was brilliant. Lovely to see her again this morning.